you so much for joining us for this interview. Um, what are the how do you see your role as a VP for Joe Jorgensen and in achieving what platform your campaign is trying to achieve?
Sure. So, so I would say the role of a VP candidate largely is to complement the presidential side of the ticket. So in this case, it's Joe Jorgensen, and complement is both in terms of supporting her on her policies, which was not hard because when we were picked together, because the way that the Libertarian Party does things. They pick the president and vice president separately. So, we don't necessarily come in as a preferred ticket from the beginning. But I think the delegates chose wisely because when we were picked together, our policies are pretty well as close to 100% as any two peoples could be. So that part has not been hard. I've really just been echoing my own thoughts on subjects, and they've been her thoughts as well. And then the other thing is complimenting her in terms of shoring up for her and her shoring up for me where we are maybe not as strong. So, for example, she's the strongest in having a more traditional presentation in the way that she presents herself and the way that she does her politics, which is good because right now a lot of Americans are looking for a return to normalcy, a return to a sense of decency in the White House. So she's able to fulfill that role in a major way. Whereas there are a lot of other people who are they're looking for something more, I guess edgy. They're looking for something more disruptive, and I'm able to provide that something a little bit more radical in my style and presentation. I'm also the first millennial on a presidential ticket, which that and the way that I presented things kind of allows me to reach out to the younger Gen X, the millennial, and the Gen Z that are old enough to vote. Reaching out to those groups, she's able to reach out to the Gen X and the boomers and so forth. And I mean, and there's overlap. We're all able to reach out to everyone, but where we are strongest, we complement each other that way. So I believe that's my role is as a complement to the ticket, which largely has been working.
On the policy side, are you both on a same page with each other, or there are the things that you two are trying to work out and see how to approach it?
We're pretty much on the same page. I mean, she's more of the this is some inside baseball with the Libertarian Party, but she's more on the, I guess, pragmatist side, and I'm more on the, I guess, radical side. But in all honesty, that's more of an issue of presentation than of actual policy. In terms of actual policy, our policy is a fairly principled and consistent interpretation of the Libertarian Party platform. I remember when I got paired with her and I thought, okay, let me go to her website and see what her issues are so I can see I go ahead and see what we disagree on now. And I went and I'm reading through her
So you
her policy.
haven't met before at
No, no,
all.
no. We've met, and I should say I had an overall understanding of some of her more signature platforms, but this was actually going through issue by issue and seeing what things, and we had met a few times, but going through issue by issue and seeing what each specific policy was just to see what disagreement there was, if any. And so I'm reading through and I go, I don't find anything here I disagree with. So that was a bit of a sigh of relief. But no, I mean, in terms of policy, we are, I mean, I would imagine if we sat long enough and talked about every single specific thing, we could find little minor disagreements on the margins. But in terms of what we have listed and in terms of what we are what our priorities are, we're about as close to 100% as any two people could be. And obviously she's the presidential pick, which this is not a 50-50 thing. She's the presidential pick, and so in that respect, I think in general I would defer to her anyway. But that hasn't even been an issue. We really agree on the problems that the Republicans and the Democrats have created for this country and the libertarian solutions that can fix those problems and free people to fix those problems for themselves.
You said about you and Joe that she's more pragmatic. You are more, in a sense, radical.
Mm-hmm.
Is the word radical doesn't scare you, or is it a word, a toxicating word to not to use? I'm asking you because you're a media savvy person, so.
Yeah, so and radicals again more of an inside baseball term within the party. So, there's the pragmatic people and the radical people, and then there's the audacious people, and there's people in a group called the Mises Caucus, which are the followers of Ludwig von Mises. So we use a lot of terms that outside of the party people go, okay, great, you're Mises radical pragma. How this doesn't help. So it's more of just kind of inside baseball stuff than anything important. Uh, when it comes down to policy, we are both principled libertarians. We look at the libertarian ethos and the libertarian philosophy of self-ownership and non-aggression and voluntary solutions, and we see that as the solution to the problems that we face, and we're able to apply it on every single subject, from healthcare to education to immigration to foreign policy to economics and everything in between, and higher education and student debt and everything else. We're able to apply it to those things because we have a very consistent philosophy, and looking through the filter of that philosophy, we can see the problems that have been created by poorly centrally planned, ad hoc, arbitrarily decided measures that Republicans and Democrats have been exclusively controlling over us for over 150 years now.
When you go to the platform that your campaign is trying to achieve, what is the number one that you care most about that, and how you're trying to go about it in your own unique ways?
It's hard for us to pick a single number one thing, but I would say that the top things right now are healthcare and education, the war on drugs, and ending the wars overseas. The wars overseas they've been going on so long that they almost kind of go in the back burner of our minds of what's going on. But if you look at so many of the issues that we are facing, they still go back to ending the wars. And if you look at, education, the issues that are with education are that we have bureaucrats and cronies and politicians in Washington, D.C., who are imposing this centrally planned solution, one size fits all, standardized testing solution for the entire country. They have spent trillions of dollars, and the literacy rates haven't gone up. If anything, they've edged down slightly. We haven't seen any increase of value as a result of that. And so we want to return the educational decisions back where they belong, with parents and teachers and their children. And with healthcare, we've seen every time the government gets more involved in healthcare costs skyrocket. We see companies that are buying pharmaceutical companies, gutting the research and development teams, just completely firing everyone, and just squatting on patents and jacking up the price of pharmaceuticals, sometimes 10, 20, 100 times what the pricing was before. And that's perfectly legal because of our ridiculous patent laws. So, we could do this on every single subject, but I would say if I had to pick, four things, it would be education, healthcare, the war, and right now justice reform, ending police brutality, ending the war on drugs, and freeing the people, the victims of the wars on victimless commerce crimes, and that whole range of things, setting people free from a militarized police state.
That's interesting that you went through the list. I had a conversation with Joe Jorgensen before, so we touched some of it, but the education you brought up, it's very interesting. So what's the best way to approach it? I think it's an issue like healthcare that has been in the conversation for a long time, and things have been tried but hasn't achieved any outcome that is acceptable or functioning for most people.
Right.
What's the main issue that you go about if you think about the education?
So I think it really, Kamiz, I think it's a perfect example of how we look at things as we often do, not everyone, but a lot of people will look at it as, well, the government needs to do something about this. And when they say the government, they mean the federal government in Washington, D.C., because we've been so conditioned that, the president needs to deal with whatever this thing is. But we've seen what happens as a result of that. When you centralize that decision into one government like that, into a centralized government like that, what you have is just a small and powerful group of people arbitrarily making decisions for 350 million people, however many hundreds of millions of parents and children, when the educational needs are so specific from region to region. And more importantly, what happens, not only is it poorly drawn out from a standpoint of it being too centralized and too one size fits all for such a diverse group of people, but when you centralize the decision making and the money and throw, hundreds of billions of dollars a year or tens of billions of dollars a year at something, here come the cronies. All the cronies show up and say, oh, you know what would fix this is this bill we just happen to have written that just happens to make us billions of dollars in the process. Oh, and we if you sign it, we'll be sure to donate to your campaign this year like we did last year or last election. And the politicians go, oh, well, you did my job for me. That's perfect. Oh, this will be perfect for education. Yep, keep those donations coming in. And that's what happens. You have anytime that you have these, and not just on education, but anytime you have these situations where the federal government has centralized all of the authority and decided to take control of a situation, what ends up happening is they have all the control. They're the ones that are doling out all the money, both through taxation and through endless printing of Federal Reserve notes that they lend to themselves and spend as they wish. And here come the cronies to make their money that they wouldn't have made by providing value to the market. They just make their money by writing laws and sending them off to the politicians to sign for them to benefit. And you have a situation each time where instead of solutions happening for the American people, instead what happens is you have laws being signed, passed, and enforced that were set up to benefit a very small handful of well-connected, politically connected, powerful cronies at the expense of everyone else. So we say remove all of that. Let you as a parent and you as a teacher decide what is best for the child, because you're the only actual parties in this transaction. So let you guys figure this out with your money. And again, you can do it at the state level, do it at the local level, whatever. But the more you allow the decisions to be made by the actual people involved in the transaction, and the more you remove the theft of the authority and the treasure by a centralized authority to make those decisions, the better those decisions are going to be, the more equitable and fair those decisions are going to be, the less you're going to see these absurd stories of abusive situations where children are being left behind. The No Child Left Behind bill left more children behind than ever before. So, remove that authority, remove the cronies, and put it back with the parents and the teachers where it belongs.
I can attest to that part. I have two boys, both in the special needs, autism spectrum disorder. Okay. My younger son has an IEP. He's nonverbal. He has an IEP, educational individuals plan, and sometimes comes home with a test about U.S. Constitution. And I asked the teacher, he needs to communicate his needs. Yeah. I have nothing against the history lessons, but he really don't get it. What are you doing? And I said, this is the county laws. We have to do it. We know, but we have to do it anyway.
Exactly. The teachers know that this is ridiculous, but it's the law. We saw something similar that was just as ridiculous and far more harmful. And I know I'm pivoting somewhat here, but with COVID-19, we, the public, knew that COVID-19 was at least a pretty scary thing, similar to SARS, except it could spread asymptomatically, which made it way more potentially deadly or potentially dangerous, because you can't just find people with the symptoms and find people that have a fever and quarantine them. It can now spread without us even knowing. And we knew that there were a few cases here starting the end of January. But we knew that because people broke the law, and a lot of people don't realize that. The CDC had regulations in place. They had a rule in place that everyone knew was stupid, but it was the law that said that if you wanted to test for a novel virus, you had to get approval. You had to get approval first, and that approval can take months. It could be that if using the old system, people still would not have approval today to start testing for the virus. And so you had doctors that knew that was the system. One was Dr. Helen Chu in the University of Washington in Seattle. She had patients coming in saying, I had been to Wuhan, China recently, and I'm having symptoms synonymous with what I'm hearing about this coronavirus thing, and I'd like to get tested. So she illegally made the test, which apparently is an easy thing if you know how to do such a thing. And she made the test kits and she tested them, and some of them came back positive. And this was happening other places too, where they were they were saying their Hippocratic oath comes before whatever the stupid regulation is. And so they started started reporting these to the CDC in a little act of civil disobedience, they said, we have results here saying that people have, so, it's here now. We need to start ramping up testing and containment and everything else so that we can stop it from, becoming this huge outbreak. The CDC's initial response to that was to say, that's great, destroy all those results and tell no one, including the people who tested positive. Do not treat them, just don't tell them. You broke the law, don't do it anymore. Thankfully, those doctors broke the law again and put their Hippocratic oath above some stupid regulation again, and they released those results to the public. And that act of civil disobedience forced the CDC's hand, and we've been behind the 8 ball ever since. But imagine if they had just said, okay, you know what, it's the law, that's fine, I'll just have to destroy it. Imagine how much worse the situation would be now than it even is, now. Going back to the situation with your son, you have teachers who know how absurd it is to be giving your son, a take-home test about the Constitution when those aren't what his needs are. But the sheet of paper says to do it, and they want to keep their job. And this is a perfect example. And who knows what, a crony that probably benefited in Washington or in their state or whatever. But that's the problem, is that instead of it being you as a parent and them as teachers and the administrators of that school or even the administrators of that school district making decisions, it's being made far away by unaccountable people and their cronies who help keep them in office. And that is the problem with education, with healthcare, with everything else. And you're experiencing it as a result. I'm sorry that you're going through that. That is something, those are the types of poorly centrally planned decisions that at the executive level, we would limit as much as possible. And on the legislative level, we would use the bully pulpit to, pressure Congress into passing legislation that repeals a lot of this nonsense.
Right, we are almost reaching at the end of the time we had. I wanted to cover 2 things with you. Okay. The mix of you as a media savvy podcaster, as a VP, with Joe as the presidential candidate, it's some kind of a unique mix, because not much of the politicians are trained to deal with media or so. I think that's why the incumbent president, Donald J. Trump, is very successful, because he knows media and
yes.
and entertainment very well. So how do you think this combination of you two as a VP, as a media savvy, is going to help the ticket?
I think it's going to work very well, because people keep focusing just on me being media savvy and being able to, knowing how to do interviews and knowing how to do all of that stuff. You were talking about, I've got my professional overlays here and still haven't figured out how to point to them in a mirror. But so
I have to say it. Everyone sees as this thinks that you are interviewing me and not me interviewing me.
This is my show now. Welcome to the show with Spike Cohen, your new guest, your new host.
You put watermarks everywhere. I don't know our Merion where to go, but yeah, we'll see.
But so, people focus on that, but Dr. Jorgensen, Joe, is a senior lecturer on psychology at Clemson University. If there's anyone who knows how to speak, it's a senior lecturer, and she shows that. I mean, you just did an interview with her. She knows what she's doing. She's a smart cookie too, and more important than even, or equally as important as being a smart cookie, she's an articulate cookie too. She's able to articulate and formulate what we're trying to say into ways that are understandable by a public.
Science-based too.
Science-based too. Yeah, and very science-based too, but is able to knows how to communicate it in such a way that it's going to resonate with a people that may not be as interested in the, we're both very much policy wonks. Most people are not policy wonks. They just want to know how what you are proposing is going to benefit or harm, them and their children and their communities. And so we're both good at communicating that. I think that especially in this era of where most of the campaigning, at least for at least the next few months, is going to be largely online, that puts us in a really unique and advantageous situation compared to where usually we're having to compete with Republicans and Democrats who can fill up stadiums with AstroTurf and present this air of inevitability. We're all now just people in front of our webcams and people on the phone and people on Skype and so forth. And but the difference is they're people on webcams having to explain why they should get another chance when they're the ones who created all of these problems that we're facing. And we're people on webcams pointing out that they're the ones who have been in charge for over 150 years and have created all of the problems that we're facing, and that we have new, bold, common sense solutions that are going to fix those problems.
Last question. How do you think your campaign could pick likely voters who are mostly in the classic domain of Republicans and Democrats and join the ticket of the Libertarian Party?
I think that there's a few things. First of all, we're going to be reaching out not just to the I guess traditional voters, the ones who typically, I call them hold your nose voters. They hold their nose and vote Republican or Democrat. Some of them swing between the two. It's not that they're terribly excited about one or the other. It's just, this guy seems less terrible than this guy. They both seem like liars. But there's also a lot of chips that get left on the table every election cycle. And those are the roughly 40% of Americans who are eligible voters who do not vote because they are so disgusted by the state of things that they don't want to hear anything from any politician. And that's where I come in, because I'm able to use more nonlinear messaging that isn't going to set them off the same way that just a typical politician would. And so I can bring them in with, more humorous and edgy and satirical stuff to entertain them, and then for them to to pay attention to what we're doing. Their cognitive defenses come down a little because they don't feel like they're being lied to by a politician. They're just being entertained. And then they realize that there is an underlying political message. They want to find out more, and then we can bring them into our message and our solutions. And also young voters that have been completely left behind by the system and are occasionally pandered to, usually by the Democrats, but that's all they are. They're pandered to, and then they're told to vote for whatever terrible option the Democrats end up picking. So we're going to be campaigning very hard for those two groups, which make up a solid majority of voters if they were brought into the pool. In terms of the hold your nose voters, this is a very unique situation, because not only is this similar to 2016, where the two options are very, very unpopular that the Republicans and Democrats have given. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are not popular politicians. But it's even worse for them than 2016, because we are, both the left and the right are experiencing their own dystopian situations. The right is experiencing these lockdowns from in the aftermath of the government's refusal to allow the healthcare workers to contain the virus back when that was possible. And now it's so overblown that now they're having to, overcorrect by telling everyone to stay inside. And you can't operate your business. You can't work unless we decide you're essential. You have government deciding who is essential or not. Last I checked, everyone's work is essential to them for them to be able to get ahead in life. And so you've got them on that side, and then many people that are on the left, and really people across the board, who are experiencing this police brutality and this ramping up of police brutality, and that in response to protests against police brutality, many police have responded by brutalizing them, by attacking unarmed, peaceful protesters, while simultaneously allowing the rest of the city, because all of their forces are concentrated on brutalizing these protesters, while in the entire rest of the city, they leave it unpoliced. So the looters can come in. The looters who have nothing to do with the protest can come in and start looting businesses, including small businesses, including people's homes, destroying everything that they've worked towards, while the police are completely derelict in their duty of protecting people and are too focused on, tear gassing and pepper spraying and tasing and knocking over peaceful, unarmed protesters. And so you have a situation where the greater body politic, pretty much everyone right now, is experiencing their own level of dystopia in one way or another. And in that scenario, where we can step in and say, hey, listen, guys, the Democrats and the Republicans created all of this. You don't like the police brutality? Donald Trump's been enforcing it and encouraging it for years. Joe Biden helped co-sponsor and co-write the laws that are allowing them to do this. You don't like what's happening with the pandemic and the lockdowns? Democrats and Republicans created the CDC regulations that led to this situation, and Democrat and Republican governors have overreacted with some of these lockdowns as a result as well, instead of allowing people to make their own conscientious, safe choices to try to slow and prevent the spread of the illness, which again they created by not allowing healthcare workers to actually treat it when it could be contained, and kept us in the dark during that time. They did this. It wasn't just Republicans. It wasn't just Democrats. It was all of them holding hands. And every time there's a problem like this, what is their answer? Run up trillions of dollars in new debt, almost all of which is handed to their favored cronies. They're big business Wall Street cronies for what I call universal basic income for billionaires. And while the rest of us have to try to make $1,200 a person work for the better part of however many months we're not allowed to work for. So in that kind of a situation, we are uniquely positioned to reach out to voters who are sick of holding their nose, because holding their nose got us here. And the politicians who told them, this time you just have to suck it up and vote for us. Next time we'll make it more important. But this time you absolutely have to vote for us or that other guy will win. Well, guess what? That guy and that other guy have been working together for over 150 years to make things terrible. And we, the Libertarian Party, are the solution. Our ideas are the solution. You own yourself, your life, your labor, your body, and your property. The government has infringed upon those things to a level that is so severe that we are now in the situation that we are in now. And the Libertarian Party proposes to set all of us free so that we can work together to solve the problems that they have imposed upon us.
Thank you so much for your time, Spike. Great conversation. You're one of those persons that I can talk hours and hours, and we touch base on things. But we have time restraint, and you have scheduled things to follow. But I hope we could remain in touch and talk on.
Yeah, I would love that, man. I would absolutely love that. And folks, thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to find out more, if you'd like to help, please go to JOJ2020. That's JoeJ2020.com to find out more about us. A new website coming up soon, but you can go on there and sign up to be a volunteer. You can go there to donate if you're able to. We would appreciate your donations. And you can find us on social media, Joe Jorgensen or Spike Cohen on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or anywhere else. You'll be able to find us. Joe Jorgensen and I want to create a future for you where we are freer and safer and healthier, and where the future for your children is even brighter than we could have ever previously imagined. And with your support and your vote, we will be able to do so this November. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.